What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Allsmith. Today's guest has been on my radar for quite some time. He's a husband, a father, and a former professional basketball player who truly thought his best athletic days were behind him. Now he's preparing for the Leadville 100-mile race in just a few days, and he's running over 80 plus miles a week. He's an adventurer, an ultra runner, a businessman, and an honest jack of all trade. Today, I'd love to introduce Ty Morris. Welcome to the show, man.
Whoa, gosh. All right, for everybody listening, we'll hopefully live up to some of that hype. It's quite the introduction, man. I'm pumped to be here, and similar with your opinion of me, I have a similar opinion of you. Been watching you from a distance. We've never formally had the chance to connect, and this is that time for us to do so. But I think people will find out pretty shortly that we have a lot of similarities and a lot of similar threads from our backgrounds we can pull on and connect on. So I'm pumped.
Yeah, man. What's funny about the intro is I contemplated back and forth of wanting to just read the legendary Eric Hinman's post of you, because he put a really epic post up about you. And these are people that we've both crossed paths for quite some time. And to me, like, the work works. Like, when you're willing to put in the work and then you're willing to invest the time, energy, attention, and emotion into meaningful relationships. Like, when I see that, I'm like, whoa. And now, you know, having you on the show, having Eric on the show, having Mike Idala on the show, Matt Bickle on the show, what a tribe of gentlemen that you surround yourself with. Before we even get into or unpack your story at all, what does it mean to know that you're really doing an amazing job fortifying deep, meaningful relationships that are going to be with you for the majority of your life?
Well, the importance of forming good friendships and deep, meaningful relationships goes back to growing up, where my dad, who never played basketball past high school, mainly because his father was old school Depression era kid and believed that when you went to college to study and prepare yourself to get a job that was stable and provided enough income to save and then retire in 40 years. That was the way people did things back then. That's obviously changed quite a bit to today. But when my dad left high school, he still maintained a love, when he went to Purdue, a love for playing basketball. And I learned to love the sport over time because of his constant exposure, the constant exposure that he gave me to the sport. He never really pushed me. He did that by design, and I'm very thankful with his approach. But one of the things that I learned very quickly was what kind of camaraderie you can build by playing a sport like basketball into your 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, if your body holds up long enough for you to do so. And it did for my dad, luckily. I was actually on the phone last night when I was doing my sauna session with one of my dad's best friends, who's still alive. For 45 minutes, I was talking to him. And I told him on the phone, I'm getting chills talking about it. It's like, it's amazing that we're here, more than half a decade after my dad passed away. And I'm thinking about calling you out of all the people that I could call and talk to right now. And it just goes to show what using physical activity in a community setting can do for connection and long-term connection. So I learned that without knowing I learned that way back. Then you go to play in college or in high school, whatever sport you play. And then I was lucky enough to go and play in Europe, and you were as well. The locker room is the biggest thing that I miss. So, yes, there are moments on the court that stick out in my memory as all-time great moments from my career. But the moments I really cherish and that I miss the most were showing up to the locker room at 2:45 or 3:30 p.m., getting ready and getting dressed for practice, knowing that we had a horrible game the day before, and guys are still cracking jokes trying to get ourselves positive because we know it's going to be a 2.5 hour death fest. Those are the moments I miss. And so when you come into, you leave college, and whatever your career is, if you're an entrepreneur or you're a businessman or you're a teacher, whatever your career is, and you're a sportsman before that, that's the thing that you seek out to find. you seek to find people that you can connect with and build community with. It's just such a powerful motivational and accountability tool. And for me, it's always been about seeking out people that are physically capable and adventurous at the same time. When I was living in Indianapolis, I moved around a lot post basketball in Europe, and we lived in Denver once before. We lived in New York City. We lived back in Indianapolis, and then we moved to Denver 3 years ago. It wasn't until about a year into Denver that I really truly found that connection when I met Eric. And then as a byproduct of meeting him, he's just like a light that attracts the moths, right?
Mm-hmm.
He brings in people that have that sort of mentality, and he pushes his body and his mind and his behaviors and his consistency to a level that, you either get in to that or you kind of fall away. And it's not like a negative thing, but there's like a positive accountability to the group where almost everyone that you see consistently hanging out with, whether it's Matt Bickle or Bo Dorning or Eric or any of the crew that you see with us constantly, everybody brings something to the table, and it starts with positivity and it ends with, stretching our physical and mental capacity. You had started this podcast with kind of like a pre-conversation and just talking about all of the intense things that this group does. And what I find most inspiring about the group that I spend time with now is that they're so open to new experiences. Yes, each of us at any given period of time is training for something very specific. Eric last year, that was CrossFit. He's going to train again for CrossFit. He's definitely going to crush this year. Bickle is in the middle of training for a marathon that he'll do in a couple of months. And what he's doing is truly inspiring. Mike Idala might be, if not the best, top 5 all-around athletes I've ever met in my life in terms of range.
Mm-hmm.
What he can do as a gymnast, plus what he can do as an endurance athlete, plus where his strength is just pretty unbelievable, actually, when you think about it.
Totally.
But all of them are completely open to doing a random thing that's using our body to connect on a Saturday.
Yeah.
It could be a hike. It could be paddleboarding. It could be mountain bike riding, but we never mountain bike ride before. It's a really unique crew. And to put a bow on this whole concept, going back to my dad, I truly think that like the best way to connect and build lifelong relationships is through doing physically hard things together with people that share that shared value. And at the foundation of who they are just generally good people. And luckily I've been in a position to find that group here in Denver. And I feel very, very happy and lucky to have that.
That's so well said, man. There's so many amazing concepts to pull from what you were just describing, but the main one that floats to the surface for me is that there's something to the human experience that is not seen or heard all the time, but must be felt. And that happens when you're doing difficult things towards a common goal of trying to, what you described as like stretch your capacity or seek your edge or pursue your peak expression. And the crew that you just described and yourself as well epitomizes that. And what I want to explore a little bit with you before we jump into our relatable experience of losing our fathers, when you thought your best athletic days were behind you and you were in this moment of reflecting on all the injuries you had had, the surgeries you had had, maybe your perception was like, oh, I'll be a yoga guy and I'll do sauna and ice and I'll get general movement. I'll eat the part. I'll look the part. I'll be an amazing dad, amazing businessman. What allowed you to be like, no, that fruit is hanging a little too low. I want to reach a little bit higher.
Mm-hmm.
How did you develop that level of intrinsic motivation to want to pursue the more challenging aspects of health and fitness?
Yeah, I mean, I wish there's probably some, if given enough time to think about it, there's probably some pithy, super philosophical, strong language that I could use to describe like some innate quality that I have in myself that allows me to stretch for those things. At its very like elementary level, I just think it's this need to grow. And I have a desire to continue to stretch who I am. I always have had that, and it's been reflected in business and as a dad and as a husband and athletically. And so if I get to a position where I feel like it's all coming too easy, I've just never been a guy that like will sit there and just let the status quo play out. Um, and it's very easy to do that. And it's not even status quo. I mean, I think my baseline is just so much higher. So my baseline may be other people's stretch goal.
Mm-hmm.
But I think regardless of where you are today, it's really comes down to, are you a guy or a gal that loves to grow, or are you not?
But here's my
And
question for
then,
you. I definitely agree with what you're saying, but I'm going to challenge it just a little bit in the sense of, for myself, it was like professional basketball, found CrossFit,
yeah,
qualified for the CrossFit Games 4 times on the team side of things, experienced a few injuries, and I was like, whoa, everything in my life was always physical, physical, physical. I checked that box. And I used fitness as a tool to almost mask maybe some of the more important things of life within business or entrepreneurship or pursuing real estate or different elements of life. And it wasn't
right,
until later having that conversation with my father and learning a lot about his life prior to his passing from cancer that it unlocked a light bulb of like, it doesn't need to be an or, it can be an and. You can pursue growth in the physical capacity and build meaningful relationships through suffering, and
yep,
you can do these things. You don't have to be the full-time athlete. And that's what really inspires me about you is you're not settling with, oh, I checked the box on the physical from pro basketball and high-level collegiate sports. You're like, no, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to be an awesome husband and an awesome father and keep pursuing the private equity that you're working in. Free is the way to be. Life beats us up a bit and causes some bumps and bruises, but that doesn't mean we have to stay on the sidelines. This is why we've partnered with Kinneon Labs. Get back to doing what you love with this incredible portable device designed to get you back in the game. Kinneon is on a mission to move people from pain to possible with their top-rated red light therapy and laser solution, which tackles inflammation along with muscle and joint pain quickly and effectively. What I love is that it's portable and rechargeable, making it easy to actually incorporate into my everyday life consistently. It's small and lightweight, so you can throw it in your gym bag or work bag or even an overnighter. Kinneon's lasers and LED combo make this cutting-edge device extremely versatile for use with general aches and pains, as well as chronic back pain, arthritis, post-surgery recovery, endometriosis, and more. This has been an amazing tool keeping my elbows and knees pain-free for pressing, pulling, and squatting in the gym. Great tools like the Move Plus give me the freedom and flexibility to continue living life on my terms without limitations. There are a lot of reasons why over 15,000 people are using this device and rating it 4.7 stars and above. Head on over to kinneon.io and use code ALLSMITH at checkout to begin your pain-free journey.
yeah. I did completely agree, and I think it's a great reframe of the question. So here's like a thing I'll share with you about my dad. When I was growing up playing basketball, one of the biggest qualities that he tried to instill in me very early was humility. And I think what happens when you play a basketball game and you're young and you're very ego driven, as young people are, the outcome of that game pretty much dictates your attitude for maybe it's a day, maybe it's a week, maybe it's longer. Your performance, it's like a Jekyll and Hyde thing. And what my dad tried to do early was instill humility and resilience in just one statement that he would make after every game. After we talked through the ins and the outs and what happened during the game and the things I could work on, he would always finish the conversation with, "It's just one game." And it's such an important concept of staying kind of even keeled about what happens in your life. It's like, it's just one game. It doesn't really matter. It matters, but it doesn't matter. If you had a great game, there's still more work to do. If you had a bad game, there's still more work to do. And when you talk about our athletic achievements of the past, like it's just one game. It's just one aspect of who I was in that period of time. And my goal is to live multiple lives. So it's not to hang on to the life that I lived when I was in my early 20s. I was playing in Europe. It was a great period, but I'm not going to define who I am over decades based on what I did over a 4 or 5 year period of time. And I'm constantly evolving as a dad and as a husband. And when you have an attitude like it's just one game, then the way that you look at every opportunity and every challenge in your life is another example to set and write the story today that you want to live for the next whatever chapter of your life, whatever that is. Right now, I'm in an endurance running chapter of my life. Will I be an endurance runner? Will I tie my identity to and being an endurance athlete? No. But for right now, like I'm going to give it my all and I'm going to dive into it. And whatever happens with the race, it's like it's just one race. But I really think that what I've been able to do very successfully is learn the lessons that can make me successful broadly, but not pigeonhole or define myself based on the outcomes in any one of those areas. And what that makes you is super powerful, because if the opinions of others is something that you've struggled with in the past, when you detach yourself from someone's opinion about how good of an athlete you are because you have these other things that you're also really good at and spending time on, it makes their words less powerful. And I've really paid attention to that over time. Is like, I pride myself that I'm going to run a race and I'm going to beat some ultra endurance athletes that do this full time, but I have all these other areas in my life that I'm also successful in. I take great pride in that. And so when you're talking about what has kept me going, it's one, not being one dimensional. I want to be multifaceted and have range to the things that I could bring on the table. And then two, of all the things that I'm involved in, like I said, being a sportsman, still being a businessman, whatever it is, just constantly looking to grow in those areas. And what that does is when you have an outlook, for me, at least what it's done is when I have an outlook of growth, you start to see opportunities to better yourself. When you don't have that like fundamental outlook of growth, you may see certain areas that could be growth areas as challenges or setbacks or other things. So they like hide themselves. So for me, it's just like, fundamentally, if I can keep myself in that growth mindset, it sounds sort of trite, but it's the truth. Then all of a sudden you look back over 5 years or a decade or 15 years and you say, oh my God, look at everything you've accomplished. But it wasn't like when I was 23, 24, I set out and I was like, I'm going to be a millionaire. I'm going to have 2 kids. I'm going to have like a beautiful wife that has her own business. I'm going to go run 100. There's no way to pre-plan that. But you just started the foundation with like, I'm going to grow. And by putting that into the universe, you start to attract people like an Eric Hinman, like a Mac Bickle. Now they're influencing you. Now they're exposing you to mountain biking. You've never mountain biked before. Oh, next thing you know, I may be running or riding 100 mountain bike, right? But it all starts with, are you open and are you willing to grow? And then everything sort of blossoms from there.
So cool, man. The growth mindset is really powerful, especially when applied and there's action taken around the words. And when your words align with your actions and you do what you say you're going to do. Jumping back into your dad, yeah. I've heard you speak on it a few times. What did your father teach you about patience?
Oh, well, I don't know if it's teaching me about patience. It's like alluding to concepts. I think what he showed me was that good things take time. And well, I'll give you another story anecdote. So when he was going through chemotherapy, this was like at the beginning of not the beginning of his cancer journey, because he went into remission a couple of times, but the last time that he had like the really serious stuff and ended up passing away from it, his first week of sessions, I was going in and I was sitting with him and was just talking with him, keeping him company during those sessions. And maybe in the second or the third, we started to talk about basketball, and I don't remember exactly how it came out, but what he said to me was, there was nothing I wanted more than for you to be a basketball player. And what's crazy about that, when I say that, Bryce, is I never felt that pressure from him. Ever. Sure, he kept me involved. When I wanted to quit, dye my hair blue, and only skateboard, he said, no, you're going to stay and play basketball too, but you can skateboard, but we're going to play basketball. I'm going to keep you involved. Or if it's not basketball, it's something else. But of the traditional sports, basketball was my thing. But he never, ever, ever said, like, you're going to make it. I want you to play in college. There was none of that. He just kept me involved. And so fast forward to when he's going through chemo, and he says that to me, it like knocked me out of the chair. Because you're talking about a guy who's in his mid 60s. I'm now 32 years old or 31 years old. So you're saying for 25, 26 years, he had to delay what he wanted for the long game of me actually getting to play, and never, ever take the bait, even in my best moments, of telling me or sharing with me that he had aspirations for me to play at higher and higher levels. And if that doesn't tell you the type of man that he was, it's hard for me to explain it in any other way. Mm-hmm. He exuded patience and humility. And by being just around him, I learned. By being in his presence and seeing how he dealt with people, I learned. By seeing how he dealt with things at work and allowed them to play out and not jump to conclusions, I learned. So when you're saying like, what did he teach me? It's like, I don't remember any exact exclusive sit down lessons where he's like, hey, patience is important. But when you're exposed to it and you're conditioned to it over time, you start to view these setbacks and these hurdles and delayed gratification as more familiar, because you've now witnessed it through osmosis by the person that you were closest with the whole time.
Yeah, man.
Right.
That's
so
a beautiful picture
like,
that you just painted, because it literally is a masterclass in delayed gratification, but not in giving you a lecture, but in truly living it. And then through observation or osmosis, like you mentioned, you're absorbing those qualities. And now you're seeing how to problem solve. And that leads us to something that you do every single day of your life. And it relates to the concept of delayed gratification. That's skill stacking, where it's like, hey, before I go start chopping wood, I got to sharpen the axe. And you've done that just incrementally over the course of time. You didn't just sign up for 100. You just completed a 50 about 5 weeks ago. What's the experience of skill stacking been like for you as a man, as a businessman, and also as an athlete?
Yeah, so the concept of skill stacking, my definition of skill stacking, is finding the cross section of where skills magnify each other and become even more beneficial than either of the skills would be in isolation. So, for example, if you run financial analysis and you know how to value a company, that's a valuable skill. But if you cannot pitch that information, you can't articulate it in a way that moves people to make decisions, it's less valuable. But if you take that financial analysis and you put great communication skills on top of it, an amazing ability to write or speak or pitch, it becomes exponentially more valuable because now you could take that skill and tell the world about it and enroll people in a journey, right? So I think a lot of times we view these like individual skill sets as like unrelated, but what happens is when you start to put them on top of each other, there's an exponential benefit to having background in each of them, but you just can't see them when it's in isolation. So an example of that would be like, from our college experience of playing sports. I was talking about this with Matt Choi. We were riding up to Leadville camp in my car, and we had a great conversation. He's a fantastic guy, and he played college sports. He played football at Monmouth. He's a wide receiver. And we were just talking about, like, just being an athlete gives you another gear when you've played at that level because of how hard it was and how competitive it was. And it's really hard to describe unless you've played at that level, but you understand it when you have. And so when you meet somebody that's played collegiate sports at a very high level, there's an immediate amount of respect because you know how difficult it was to be successful, to even be on the team, let alone getting playing time. So when you come and do a thing like an ultra endurance race, the way that you're approaching the feelings of pain or the feelings of hardship or the Saturday morning runs that you know you need to get in, but are very difficult to get in because it's cold and it's early and your body is sore, it's easier to do because we had to do it for 4 straight years when we were very, very young. And so I think about that a lot, like, especially in business. You see young kids all the time where they're saying, oh, well, I don't like structure. For instance, I don't like structure. I'm an artistic mind. I'm a right side brain. I like to communicate. I like the free flow. It's like, that's fine, but you have no clue what you're doing. And so instead of just throwing them in and allowing them to be their natural, authentic right side brain self, you take them for a year and you lock them down. And you said, here's the proper process of how you prepare. This is what you do to get on a pitch. This is what you do before the pitch. This is how you follow up. This is how you do your analysis. And you just bang into them the rigorous, consistent training protocol. And then you take the handcuffs off because now they have perspective on how to be successful. So then they can take their natural ability, their right side self, to come in and overlay on top of this foundational, structured, more fundamental left brain self that we've now created, and it exponentially makes them more valuable. But what people miss is that I'm not going to do this because it doesn't come naturally to me. But they don't realize that the whole thing handcuffing their natural abilities is that they don't do this enough. It's like too much of anything is bad.
Yeah.
Too much talking in a conversation is horrible. Too much listening in a conversation is not good either, right? But when you pair what you're good at, if you're a good conversationalist and you like to talk, if you pair a little bit of listening and a little bit of inquisitive question asking, how much it enhances what it is that you're going to say, it's crazy. But it just takes a little bit, right? So I think about that all the time with skill stacking. It's like, it's even in my training. It's like, okay, this trade-off of a run, does it make sense for me to go on a 2.5 hour run today with the way my body feels, or will I get more bang for my buck and learning how to recover better? And you're learning a new modality. Will that long-term make me better off than going and pounding the pavement for 2.5 hours? So that's how I think about skill stacking. It's been a concept that I've implemented probably post basketball more than anything. But honestly, Bryce, like, we were doing it way back in the day when we were playing basketball too.
Yeah, you don't realize it. It's like unconscious competence back in the day.
For sure.
As you evolve, it becomes like a transferable skill, and you're actually cognizant about it, and you're realizing how to utilize that skill. And I also appreciated what you described, like right side brain, really valuable. But it's almost like playing basketball and the size of the hoop is changing, the dimensions are changing, the 3-point line distance is changing every game, the weight or the size of the ball is changing. Yeah. There are no parameters. But when you give a creative parameters and keep them within structure for a year to instill that habit, and then you basically do what you said, you give them more leash, or you give them more freedom to go do the thing. Now they're 2-for-1 special. You get the right side and left side brain rather than just one side. The way you painted that was beautiful. It was really cool. I'm curious though, along those lines, there needs to be a push and pull dosage or ratio associated with, this is how I feel, this is where my body's at, and this is cognizant logic of like, okay, this is what my coach is saying, or maybe this is an appropriate dosage of miles. What's your strategy for kind of finding that flow state between the two? Because it's really easy to be like, oh, this is how I feel today. But then all of a sudden you're around the Hinmans or people like that. They're like, nah, we're doing this instead. And it's kind of this like fun component where maybe you're influenced by your environment. You're influenced by the goal or the thing you signed up with or for. You're influenced by food, sleep, stress, work, inflammation or injuries. All those things have to be variables to consider. How do you play with that relationship of logic and emotion?
Yeah, I think, well, it's difficult. The first thing I would say is you learn it over time to know where your body is and isn't. I always joke with my wife because when the kids have something wrong or she has something wrong physically, like maybe not like internally, like, I don't know, if her stomach hurts or whatever, I'm not great with that. But if she's like, oh, my leg hurts, this is what's going on. Because of how many injuries that I've had and how much rehab that I've done and my background in sport, I can pretty much narrow it down to what she's feeling, which is really, really interesting. I have a really strong connection kinesthetically with my body to where I know when I'm just being a little wimp and I'm sore and when there's something just off. And when I feel like there's something just off, I'm at the point now in my life where I honor that feeling quite a bit because I've always been down. I've also been down the path where I haven't honored it and it's ended up in an injury. Right. So I personally just have developed this knack for understanding exactly when I can push and when I don't. That being said, I also err on the side of not trusting my feelings and my energy and giving them too much merit because, and this is where coaching comes in, honestly. I think for running this 100, anybody that's doing anything extreme, CrossFit games, running ultra marathons, running a marathon for that matter, anything that's like physically intense, having a very logical, removed counterparty is very, very powerful because there are plenty of mornings where I woke up and said, man, like I've never done running before. This is all new. Like, should my body feel like this? And Don, my coach, would say, look, the data's saying you're fine. You're fatigued, but that's what this is. Running on sore legs is what this is. So go out and get it. And lo and behold, 2 miles into that run, my body felt fine. And I ripped off a 3-hour run by not trusting what my mind was telling my body to do. So while I've developed this very strong connection, I would also say that err on the side of following the protocol, whatever you plan to do, you do, and barring anything extreme, you still execute on it is the best method to follow. Because I think we're all capable of more than we give ourselves credit for. And then from there, if you have multiple days where you're still not feeling great, you take a rest and then you recalibrate. Where I think most people start though, is they lay too much of their decision-making on how they feel that day, instead of just sticking to the structure of what's needed to get done. And I think the more that you can remove that negotiation, the better you can get at removing that negotiation, the more progress and success you're going to have. That's everything though, Bryce. That's not just physical activity, dude. That's kids. That's being married. That's being in business. That's being a man. You know, being a man is doing what you need to do, what you have to do, not what you want to do all the time. And that was a very powerful lesson I learned from my dad as well. Like, there's shit you don't want to do, bro. Like, there's stuff you're going to wake up and you're like, no, it's the last thing I want to do. But you don't want to brush your teeth. That's fine. They're just going to fall out in 2 years, right? Like, you need to brush your teeth. It's no different. You want to go and prepare yourself for a 100-mile race. Okay. There's stuff that you don't want to do, but you need to do. You have to get up at 4 a.m. because you want to spend time with your family and you got to run your 3-mile run or your 3-hour run. You need to do that. And right now, I think it's very easy to just do what you want to do all the time and not do what you need to do. And I think if more people just set a program that they didn't negotiate with, had a coach that held them accountable and that didn't give them excuses, a lot more people would be achieving the success that they would want to achieve.
For sure, man. I think that third party is really important because you can at least feel seen, heard, and understood in whatever you are feeling. So you can basically acknowledge your feelings, wave to them and say, hey, you exist. And then in that dialogue with your coach or with a third party, now you're developing a wherewithal in a relationship with the feeling of like, how valuable is this? On a 1 to 10 scale, what's your numerical value? What's the merit or the power that I'm going to give over making this decision? And I think more often than not, once those questions start playing ping pong back and forth between you and your coach, more often than not, you're going to do the run. You're going to do and execute the program because the data is saying so, and the data has a historical track record to overcome feelings and have proof of concept, which is then confidence. And in the beginning, you're probably questioning everything, which is great because you're curious. It's a new thing. It's not relatable to anything you've been through before. And then over the course of time, what happens? Buy-in and trust. So the questioning becomes diminished and you realize you do what you need to do, not what you want to do. And being able to hear that from the horse's mouth is pretty cool. And it leads me to want to explore decision-making with you. Something that I've heard you talk about a lot in relation to decision-making is what's the one decision that maybe is like triage that positively impacts everything else within your life and within your day? Let's explore that a little bit because I know for you it's working out first thing in the morning and kind of getting yourself cooking a little bit to set the tone for the day.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is not like a novel idea from me by any means. I think the first person I heard it from was Tim Ferriss, and then there was a book called The One Thing that you read, and it was all around this concept, like, is there one decision that makes all the other decisions that you're wanting to make, contemplating, making, etc., either easier or unnecessary? That's the idea. You can extend on that, which is what I've done. And you talk about changing your physical setting, 1, and changing your physical state, 2, to be a catalyst for the rest of your day. And there are others that talk about this as well. It's not novel, but the way that I've always looked at physical activity, 1, I need to get it in daily. The most convenient way to do that is before all the chaos starts. And that's where it started, was my need to get in my workout was non-negotiable. So where do I fit it in where it fits best? And that was always in the morning. But what I realized after doing that, and then when COVID hit, not doing that as much, or maybe playing around, working out at lunch, working out at night, etc., when people were locked down at home, was that I didn't have the same amount of energy throughout the day when I did it later in the day, did the workout later in the day. Working out in the morning was an amazing catalyst for my energy level and my positivity and my outlook, as everybody can research and listen to Andrew Huberman podcasts till you're blue in the face. They'll tell you all the same things. It also crystallizes consistency and discipline. And it goes back to like running these 100-mile races and having exposure to like a 50-mile or a marathon. When you have the experience of going through those shorter distances, the 100 becomes easier. When you're experiencing it for the very first time and you don't have any hardship to recall on when you're in those hard moments, it's tougher, right? There's going to be moments when I'm running the 100-mile race where I think about my dad, and I've already felt very connected to him in all of my training in the mountains. But when someone's on their deathbed and they're fighting for their life, it makes anything that we're doing here on earth, physical or non-physical, like a cakewalk, man. I mean, like, what are you talking about? Like, we're just running. We're just having fun. You're tired, walk a little bit. But this isn't life or death. So you have to, when you have these moments of hardship, you can recount them and use the strength that you can derive from those to get you through whatever you're going through next. And I look at working out in the morning as a mini hardship. Yes, for fat loss and health, it doesn't make a difference. I don't know. It's like work out at the time that you feel like you're going to get it in. But I'll tell you that when you consistently get up at 4:35 in the morning and go in and get your work in before everybody else is up, there is an edge that you walk away with over a, call it medium term period of time, that supports your ability to endure setbacks and hardship. It does.
You become
It
uncommon amongst the uncommon, as Goggins would say. And I know a lot of people
does.
like, might push him to the side, but there is something to, I'm willing to do the thing that you're not willing to do.
Exactly.
And that, like you
Exactly.
said, gives you that extra edge and obviously
Even if it's in
unlocks,
your own mind, even if it's in your own mind,
mm-hmm.
but that's all that matters.
It unlocks
That's
like
all that matters.
reservoirs of potential that maybe you didn't know existed because you're simply enrolled in, no matter how difficult the task is, I'm willing to participate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's cool, man. Unlocking some of the mindset associated with your injuries. I've read somewhere you've had countless surgeries, ankles, knees.
Mm-hmm.
Let's unpack that a little bit. I want to better understand that because that gives people a little bit more context of your resilience and your willingness to just keep putting one foot in front of the other, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so let's go through the surgeries. So when I was injury free until I showed up to Boston University as a freshman, and I broke my ankle in a preseason practice game
Dude.
that freshman year. And that was my first experience with injury, any real injury. And it was hard, dude. But what it allowed me to do was to work that muscle of resilience in a way that I had never worked it before. Like for me, not being allowed to play the game that I love to play, that I was going to college to play, that I've played for the last 14, 15 years was something that like probably was the most painful experience I had up until that point, because I never had anything taken from me involuntarily by outside factors. It had always been under my control, and I didn't have any control. So I had to learn very quickly that like things can go in an instant, to value what you have because it can get taken. But it also, like I said a second ago, it made me turn inward and then start to develop this inner strength that I'm going to come back better than I ever was before. And so I just worked. I was maniacal that off season. I was wheeling in a chair, and I would sit there in the paint and I would just shoot for hours from a chair because I had a cast on my leg for 6 months. And that's where I developed some of the strength that I'll talk about here in a second. And then I came back my redshirt freshman year, and no one knew me. We had a couple seniors graduate, a couple guys transfer out, and I was able to start. I started that entire season, and I had an amazing redshirt freshman year. I mean, to the point where I won Rookie of the Year in the league. I was second team all conference. USA Basketball puts out this magazine, and then the America East, they rated me the number one NBA prospect going into my sophomore year. The school had written articles about me and two other amazing guards, Corey Lowe and Carlos Strong. And they said this is the best 3-guard combo the school has ever had in its history. All of them will have their jerseys retired. I scored 450 points my freshman year.
Wow.
So I was on my way to a 2,000, point. If you kind of extrapolate that out, a 2,000 point career, and there's only like one in the school's history. Mm-hmm. But I didn't score 1,000 points in my college career. So come back my redshirt. I have surgery after that redshirt freshman year on my other ankle, same surgery. And that was kind of the beginning of the end related to my consistency playing. I missed half the next year with stress fractures in my shins because I had to come back too soon. So my sophomore year was kind of shot. I came back my junior year, tore my ACL midway through the season, and then came back my senior year and broke my hand in the middle of the season. So my redshirt freshman year was the only year I played the full season. And look, there was a moment in time after my junior year where I was going to quit, and I'm so glad I didn't. We had a new coach come in, and it was an opportunity to kind of redefine myself after having so many setbacks. But there's this saying. I think the biggest thing that I learned throughout all that was a little bit more humility. But also there's this saying that, and you'll relate to this in basketball, where it's like, can you win without the ball? And I won without the ball in high school because I played with 2 NBA guys and our entire starting lineup was D1. So I learned it, but then I quickly forgot it when I got to college and then started to drink my own Kool-Aid a little bit. I thought I was maybe better than I was, and I was living, getting high on my own supply, and felt like almost like I was owed certain things, to be honest. And so when that all crumbled, I pretty much fell apart mentally. I started to go see a sports psychologist. I was thousands of miles away from home. And I just felt alone. And it was like one of the darkest times of my life, because for the second time after that second surgery, I had been basketball had been taken again. And now it wasn't a situation where I was coming back onto a team that was a bunch of fresh new faces and all the seniors had left, but these were established guys that I've been playing with that were now moving into the position that I had filled, that were now scoring the ball, taking the shots that I had taken before. So what you see from the sidelines is this ability to kind of fall into the distance and for people to forget about you. And that was very daunting, to feel like you were at the top of the world, that you were owed something, that this was your moment to shine, and to have that taken was just awful. But in hindsight, going back to my point about learning how to win without the ball, what it taught me is, one, nothing's guaranteed in life. You have to work constantly for the threats that you never see coming to withstand them. And your measurement on the team is how good of a teammate you are. It's not about your points. It's not about the accolades. No one cares. No one gives a shit, dude. Like, no one knows who started on those teams, who went on to play after those. I'm dust in the wind for anybody that looks at BU right now. But the guys that I played with, the most important thing was the type of teammate you are. Can you win without the ball? And so what I've taken from all of those lessons, from those injuries, is like just what I said. You have to prepare for the threats that you don't see. You have to realize that you're not as big as you think you are, and that your impact when you leave is not about what's on paper. It's about how you made people feel, the type of relationships that you had, and did you make everybody better around you when you showed up? And it took a lot of setbacks to beat that into my head. Mm-hmm. When you're young, dude, the ego is strong as hell. And you get a little bit of taste of like success, and quickly you can start to forget the things that got you there. And I did there for a little bit of time. And luckily I had some setbacks that put me back in my place, but also strengthened me, because now when I look at other things that come up, like I've had a couple nagging injuries with this run, instead of being like, woe is me, like I'm not going to show up as 100%. You know what my mindset is, Bryce? Even if it's true or not, there's no one showing up this Saturday that's 100%. Mm-hmm. There's no one. So your setbacks are no worse or better than their setbacks. It's just about what you do with them. Mm-hmm. So what's your attitude going to be when you're running and your foot hurts? You're going to look around and say, everybody else's foot hurts too. Yeah. But I've already been through this. I know what it is. And so I'm going to be able to withstand it better, even if it's fake. But those are the types of things that I learned from having so many injuries and setbacks.
The Trident family taught me something really important this last year, that we are all a bundle of stories, both good, bad, and everything in between. All of their cold brews remind their customers that they are part of something bigger than themselves. I start my day with the Sweet Cream Cold Brew as I am prepping my mind and body for fitness, service, coaching, and podcasting. With various locations in San Diego, they offer over 14 nitro cold brews and a variety of specialty drinks. You can find the perfect brew and pair it with one of their treats from the Keto Bakery. You can check them out over at tridentcoffee.com and use code ALLSMITH to take your coffee experience to the next level. I love the mindset and the reframing that you've played with, so that it's an asset to your life rather than a what was me victim mentality that can be really heavy to carry, especially 100 miles like you've got coming up. Something that comes to mind too, though, in mentioning your high school days and 2 NBA guys that played on your team. Who were those guys again?
Mike Conley and Greg Oden.
Yeah. Ohio State guys. And what's super cool, in my opinion, is just the outstanding freshman career you had because of the belief that was instilled in you, and just probably the swagger, the attention, being on AAU teams, probably shoe companies being around all the time, probably Sonny Vaccaro all around. We can reference Shoe Dog with Phil Knight. We can reference some of the different Netflix things where they talk about MJ's shoe and Nike and all the things, but it's like you lived that a little bit behind the scenes, maybe to a different degree, but it's very familiar to you at the very least. And then as a byproduct, when you walk into Boston University, there is an ego that probably was a great asset to you until it wasn't. It allowed you the cognizant ability to be like, oh no, I played with these guys and they're at Ohio State killing it over there. I'm going to take that same mentality over here and do something very similar. And that worked until it didn't work anymore. And what comes to mind, Ty, is how you went from A to B is not really how you go from B to C. And when you experienced those injuries, you had this stubborn resistance, which I've had in many facets of my life. We're like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like, it worked before, why isn't it working now? Self-reliance is everything. Work ethic is everything. If I just get more shots in the gym, spend a little bit more time in the weight room, run a few more sprints, get my conditioning level the way I believe it to be tuned to the right frequency, I'm going to get the thing. It worked. And then you break an ankle. And then you hurt your other ankle. And then you get the ACL. And then you start distancing yourself, like you said, not purposefully, but just the light at the end of the tunnel isn't as clear. It's now foggy. And then you were basically learning, okay, this isn't happening to me, it's happening for me. What can I learn? What value can I add in being a great teammate? And I think it's very important for people to understand that the ego is not necessarily the enemy always, but it can become the enemy if you're not open-minded and willing to change based on the circumstances that arrive on your plate.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's well said.
So proud of you for not giving up. I feel like that would have been really easy that junior year. How did your college career end up, and how did you get the opportunity to go play overseas?
It ended up fine. I mean, I had a good senior year. Good, not great, but it was very solid, and it just renewed my love for the game again, which is the most important thing. What I realized about playing in my senior year was just like, this should be fun. And it wasn't fun for a while. So it made it fun again. And I owe that a lot to the teammates that I had, and the coach that I had, and the situation that I was in. Yeah, Europe was interesting, man. So when I was graduating, I signed with an agent that my dad knew in Indianapolis. And that agent promised me looks from a bunch of different pro teams, GMs, coaches that were coming into the United States to watch, workouts in Indianapolis and some other places around the country. And what happened was, over the course of that summer, post-graduation, I kept hearing one name of one team in Slovakia from this agent over and over and over again. And it got to the point where it was so redundant that I started to question whether he was actually talking to any other teams about me. And come to find out, this particular agent had a deal with that team in Slovakia to deliver a point guard. And so there was some underhanded dealings. I ended up firing that agent. But the problem with the timing of that firing was that it was late in the summer. Everybody had filled their roster spots. A couple of European teams were still waiting on summer league NBA stuff to finish up and some training camp stuff to finish up and pick up some NBA guys that didn't make the cut. But there was no opportunity for me. So I left. I basically decided I wasn't going to play in Europe and I was going to go play or work in finance. But at the time, this was like 1 year post financial crisis. And no one was really hiring. I mean, I bet they were hiring top of the class Ivy League type candidates, but they weren't hiring me. I got to the finals based on a relationship and relationships that I had with other alumni for Morgan Stanley's bond trading desk in New York and Barclays in New York and some other places, but didn't make it. And did a road trip, road show, interview, networking type stint in between Boston and New York, where I just drove my car up and down, was sleeping on couches. And it was fun, but I felt empty. And I didn't feel like there was like the business of basketball was finished. I just felt like it was kind of forced. So I go back home and I'm playing in some pickup games at a local rec center. And there's a guy that I'm playing with. His name's John Griffin. He's now the head coach of Bucknell. But at the time, he was the video guy for the Indiana Pacers. He's the brother of a guy named Matt Griffin, who had just transferred to BU the year I graduated. So he was sitting out a year, but he was on the practice team. He had transferred from Rider. Great guy, and we're still friends to this day. Matt Griffin is an assistant coach under John at Bucknell. But John had been playing with me in these pickup games, and he contacted his friend, Drew Morrison. True story. Drew Morrison works for, I think, a agency called CAA. CAA represents big-time NBA guys, and some of his clients now are like Jordan Poole, OG Anunoby. So he's representing really big guys at the time, or really big guys now. But at the time, he was doing European guys. So Drew Morrison calls me as I'm walking into an interview to be an industrial equity analyst for a mutual fund company. And he's like, "Hey, do you got a second?" I'm like, "Actually, not really. I'm on my way into an interview." And he said, "Listen, just give me 5 minutes." So we sit there and talk, and he's like, "Look, I heard you're in shape. I got your highlight video from John. If you could still play half at this level, I have an opportunity for you in Romania, a 10-day tryout, but you leave in 2 days. So give me a call back. Let me know what you think." So I walk into this interview and go through the pleasantries with this guy. His name's Tom Pence. Tom Pence is the brother of Mike Pence. Tom Pence was running a small cap growth portfolio at Wells Capital Management. And we leave the interview and Tom's like, "Listen, love that you came in. Thank you for coming in. You're not an analyst. You need to be client facing and you need to go take this opportunity." And I was like, "I'm going to go take this opportunity." So I leave. I call Drew and I say, "Look, we're going. We'll pack up our bags." So I go home, I tell my parents, and my dad is ecstatic. My mom is like kind of nervous, like, what does this all mean? But she's on board. Get on a plane, flying to Romania. I have 2 bags. And the experience of flying to Romania was probably the worst travel experience of my life, because there was like 3 connecting flights, and one of the flights was so delayed getting to Munich that I missed the flight from Munich to Romania. And it was like what should have been like a 17-hour trip. It was like a 34-hour trip.
Oh, gosh.
So I land in Romania. It's like early in the morning. I can't remember if it's like 1, 2, or 3. Let's just call it 2 a.m. And when you pull up to the tarmac, there are no like bridge gates. So nothing connects to the plane. You get off the plane and you walk on the tarmac into this like basically metal barn looking building. You walk inside, all of the floors are polished concrete. There's no food, no kiosks, and it's night. So there's no one in the airport other than the people getting off the plane and a couple of people helping those people. We walk into the lobby of the airport where everybody checks in, inclusion of Pocono, Romania, and there's one giant guy standing there with a sign with my name. And he is barely speaks any English, but he's like, "Hey, are you Tyler?" I'm like, "Yes." He's like, "Okay, come with me." So we walk outside. He grabs my 2 bags, puts them on his shoulders, like so light for him. And he's walking out of the car. I'm like, all right, so he's going to be in this giant SUV or van or whatever. He walks up to this small Fiat car and he gets in and he looks like one of these like grizzly bears in the circus cars over the steering wheel. So he hops in and he puts my bags in the back. I get in and we're driving. So early in the morning, there's no lights on. And the only lights you can see in all these gray concrete buildings from the communist era were like every now and then you'd see a green plus sign for a pharmacy lit up like neon green, but that was it. And like every 5th street light was lit up. So it was just like, and there's potholes everywhere. I was like, dude, where am I? Middle of the winter, ex-communist country.
You're just in it.
Pull up to this hotel. I'm in it, dude. I'm like, all right. So we pull up to this hotel and we walk in, and the hotel basically has no lobby, no seating, and there's one wooden like podium, presentation podium like you would see at an elementary school where the teacher stands behind with a book open with a log of who's staying and which rooms and where everybody's staying. And behind him, nailed on the wall, is a key hook board, and where all these physical keys are just hooked into it. So they're going back and forth in Romanian speaking. They look at me, they laugh. They go back and forth in Romanian. They look at me and laugh. I'm like, oh my God.
And you're standing there just like a deer in headlights with your tail between your legs. Like, what did I just do?
What am I doing? So the guy turns to me after they talk for a while and he says, okay, your room's out the door. It's snowing, by the way, winter. Out the door, up the metal stairs on the outside, in the 2nd level door, and it's the first door on your left. Go there and I'll come up and meet you in a second. So I walk outside, and the metal like graded stairs are like what you would see on the outside of apartment buildings in New York. I'm like walking up, you can hear my steps on the ice and the metal. Get to the door, open it up, first door on the left, it's already kind of cracked. Walk inside, and what I see is like a room with tile floors, no rug, a metal bed frame with like a twin size bed on it, a very, very small wooden table with a tube TV on it, and one painted picture of a landscape Romanian farmland nailed into a concrete wall, about the size of what you would like our laptop screens in this giant room, just one picture. And I sit down on the bed, and the lights up top were like fluorescent lights, like bluish white fluorescent lights. I sit on the bed. I'm like, what am I doing? What am I doing? And it felt like 20 minutes. It was probably 2 minutes. He comes in and he says, hey, we're not staying here. And he yanks me out, and I get back into his car, and we go to a much nicer hotel in Romania and get me settled in. And it was like, but in that moment, I was so kind of in shock and just regretting what I was doing. I get to that hotel, fast forward through the 10-day tryout. I play the entire season, and I'm happy to go into the story long-winded, but by the end of that season, I hit a shot in game 6 of that season. That was a buzzer beater that wins the championship for the Romanian League. And it was the greatest feeling of my life in from a sporting event standpoint. And when you look back on that story in aggregate, the whole point of me going long-winded and telling that story is this. And it kind of ties into the growth mindset that we talked about at the beginning of this discussion that we're having. You never know what the next outcome is going to be. For me, it was like I knew that basketball wasn't done, but I never had aspirations of winning a championship in Romania or being in that position to even do so, right? But you just are open and you want to grow, and it puts yourself in that position to have one of the greatest moments that you'll never forget in your life. Mm-hmm. But to get through that, you have to be willing to sit on a bed at 3 a.m. in the middle of Romania and wonder what the hell you're doing
Totally.
in order to get there. So I think it's one of the coolest stories of my life, and it's something I'll never forget.
Ty, I'm so happy you told that story. It's so freaking cool. Similarly, this is a long time ago now. It feels like a lifetime ago. But I transferred from San Diego State to Cal State Northridge in the Big West. And I had redshirt that first year. And then that technically my third year in college, but my redshirt sophomore year, I'm getting a little bit of playing time. Like, I'm having some fun. I'm knocking down some threes. I'm playing my role. And then all of a sudden we're getting ready to play UCLA at Poly Pavilion. That's where I grew up wanting to go. My dad was a John Wooden fan. There's John Wooden stuff everywhere in our home. Be quick, but not in a hurry. Success is peace of mind and doing your absolute best to be the best that you're capable of becoming. All of these quotes live rent-free in my ears. When I was in high school, one of my neighbors was working at Tarzana Hospital, and his role was to pick up John Wooden and take him to his appointments. And so one day he invited me to go to his house, and I'm chatting with John Wooden for like 2.5 hours, just like a kid in a candy store, asking every question under the sun.
That's crazy, dude.
And all of a sudden he goes, you know, Bryce, I'm a little bit tired. I think I'm going to go to lunch with some friends. And I was like, oh, okay. And there was like a local restaurant. It's called VIPs. It's in the San Fernando Valley there on Ventura Boulevard. And you know who walks in? Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And I go, and I think I was like a junior in high school at the time, and I shake his hand. And John Wooden then goes off, and I'll never forget that experience. It was me and my dad sitting there just having a 2-hour honest conversation.
That's just crazy.
A little bit of a tangent, but he loved women's basketball and always talked about how they played the game the right way. So to see what's happening now with Caitlin Clark and the growth and development, he's up there dancing as he's looking down on the development of the sport. But
that's so cool.
That UCLA game was a pivotal moment. The starting shooting guard ahead of me had gotten himself in trouble, and he had some disciplinary issues, so he was suspended that game. So head coach at the time comes up to me and he goes, hey man, like, you're going to get some significant minutes, and I just want you to be ready and I want you to be excited. Ty, I was so ready. I was so pumped. And, we start off and they're so much bigger, faster, and everything compared to us. They had Malcolm Lee at the time, who played in the NBA for a little while, a guy named Josh Smith. And they were performing really well. And after the first like 3 or 4 minutes, my name gets called. So I'm sitting at, the center thing, kind of taking off my warm-up top, getting my shoes ready to rock, like getting my mindset ready to rock. I walk into the center to substitute somebody out, and he calls me back. He's like, never mind. And I'm like, what? So anyway, he's like, yeah, go sit down. We're gonna do a change of substitution. No idea why, but it was a moment where like this huge peak of like, this is my shot, is just like ripped. And so I'm like sitting there on the edge, like ready to rock. I don't play the entire first half. And then all of a sudden the second half comes around. I don't play almost the entire time. We're down by like almost 50. And he puts me in the last 3 minutes. And I was like, this isn't the narrative that I was told. I'm a little bit confused by what's going on here. And so we go to the locker room, we get ripped. And then I'm just kind of sitting with this, like, what's going on here? So I remember like a few days later, I go in and I have a conversation with the head coach, and I never really got an answer. And one of the highest qualities that I always felt from my father and from other coaches was just this intrinsic belief. I think when people give you an element of belief based on your work ethic, based on the heart that they see in certain moments, that's what unlocks that true potential. So I went to practice for a few days and then ultimately made the decision, I'm not playing for this man anymore. And I stopped playing college basketball. And I went in, I just became an intern in the strength and conditioning room there at Cal State Northridge. I didn't have any credentials. I was just pursuing my bachelor's degree and finishing school, so I just cleaned up chalk and observed. Meanwhile, I was kind of playing pickup basketball on the side. I was playing in, I don't know if you know the Say No Classic. It's like a semi-pro thing was going on for a long time. It's a bunch of just like overseas and college and NBA guys that kind of just play pickup in the summer, and different scouts come and just watch. So I was playing there a little bit and then playing some pickup basketball, and you might know the name Pooh Richardson. And he played for the Clippers for a little while, and we were playing pickup together very similarly to you. And he happened to call an agent. Like, I see this guy, he's got something. I don't really know how to articulate it, but like he's got something. He can shoot the ball really well. And he asked same thing for a highlight tape, and I thought nothing of it. I was like, man, this guy's cool, but my college career didn't turn out the way I wanted it to. High school career was pretty great. Played for a team that was #1 in the country for a little while, same as you. All 5 guys went Division I. And I was pretty set on just like my career being done. Yep. And I'm laying in bed one night, and I have my computer, my laptop on top of me. I'm doing some work for school. I end up falling asleep with my computer and my phone on me. And it's like 3 o'clock in the morning. My phone is going off, and it's like plus, and it's like all these numbers. I was like, spam. Like, I'm not paying attention to that. So I put it back down. I go back to sleep. They call like 3 more times. Finally, I answer. I'm like, hello? And the guy goes, hey, is this Bryce? And I was like, yeah, what's up? And he goes, my name is Peter Ingstrom. And he was from a Swedish basketball club. And so he goes through the whole spiel, kind of making a pitch. And I'm kind of confused. I honestly think that somebody's playing a joke, just because I was kind of in that, like you said, that vulnerable, dark spot of like, didn't work out the way I wanted. I'm lost. I got to finish school, but like, I'm not really sure the next direction. I thought I'd play professionally somewhere, and just didn't really happen. And I was living at home at the time, and he gives an offer, and it was all verbal at the time. Nothing was set in stone. And I'm like, super excited, but also really unsure. It feels off. And so 3 weeks pass. I don't hear from him. All of a sudden, an email comes through, and it's an offer with a round trip ticket. And I was like, holy shit, this is real. And anyway, we went back and forth for a while. I wasn't sure exactly what to expect when I got there. Like, we were still negotiating pay, and like you've described on some of your captions, like you don't realize at the time when they make you an offer that like they're going to cover your housing, you're going to get a food stipend, like there's going to be all these other things covered. And I ended up reading a book called Playing for Pizza by John Grisham. And I've talked about this before. And it very much related to my story, where it was about a quarterback that played in the NFL, and they end up making it to like the NFC Championship game, and he was like a third string, was not anticipating playing. And all of a sudden, the guys that were playing ahead of him all got injured. And he got his name called. He goes out, they're up by like 2 or 3 touchdowns in the NFC Championship game in the fourth quarter. He throws like 3 or 4 interceptions, they lose the game. And at the end of that game, he goes to his agent, and his agent's like, it's okay, like your career's not done, like, and he's like throwing in the towel. He's like, dude, nobody's gonna want me anymore. I just threw away the game in the biggest stage possible right now.
Right.
And anyway, his agent ends up finding him a place to play in Italy. And it's basically like not for a lot of money, but allowed him to live his football dream out. And it's called Playing for Pizza. He ends up meeting the girl of his dreams, traveling the world, like having an amazing experience over there, similar to that shot that you made in Game 6. And same thing for me over there. Like, it wasn't the best experience at first, didn't really know the culture. And then there was a game where we were playing the best team in the league. And this is, very low level professional basketball in Europe. And I had 41 points. I was taking ridiculous shots that were going in. I have no idea how or why. It was the epitome of a flow state for me.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And there was a play right at the end where I'm like, receive a pass over my shoulder. I'm on a fast break. Somebody kind of undercuts me. I put the ball around my back, and I kind of throw it up, and I land on somebody's foot, and I twist my ankle like pretty bad. This is pretty low level basketball. We don't really have a training crew. We have a 4-hour bus ride back. And so I rap it really hard after the game. Everybody's interviewing because they never called me by my name. It was just the American. And they called poing. Like, I'll send you the newspaper article. It's like, American scores 41 points. And the bus ride back, like, I'm high on that, but I'm also like, fuck, like, what am I going to do about this ankle? Like, I could barely walk. And so I wrapped the thing super tight, tie my shoe super tight. I probably pop like 500 milligram ibuprofens.
Yeah.
We get back, and I didn't have a car or anything there. I just rode a bike. And so I rode a bike to their version of 7-Eleven and like got a bunch of bags of ice and put them into like a trash can. And I like marinate my foot all night. I'm like writing the ABCs, capital and lowercase, to do anything I can for my foot. And the very next game was like 2 or 3 days later. I'm taking the same shots that I was taking that other game, and they're not going in. And I am just getting destroyed. I ended up having like 19 points on like, I don't know, 7 of like 26 from the field. It was not a good game. The field goal percentage was not good. And similar to you, like overcoming hard things, I end up having to go to dinner with them. And they asked to go to a Thai restaurant. And I just remember like them threatening to send me home. And I remember in that moment, like 5 days ago, I was on the cover of every magazine, newspaper in Sweden, this little small town called Kalmar. 5 days later, I have a horrible game. We lose on a sprained ankle, same as you. I didn't want to say anything about it because I didn't want to get sent home or anything like that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But it just goes to show like how fast it could change. And I was almost like comedic at that moment because this is probably a story I tell myself, but I think a lot of former athletes feel this, and probably a lot of high-performing men. You're loved for your function, not for who you are. I don't think that's eternally true all the time, but you need to provide in some capacity. And there needs to be a value add when you're an expensive American. They're paying for a work visa. You're all the way over here to do a job. And when you don't do the job, they got to point the finger at somebody. And at that age, I was so used to doing this. Their fault. This is why it happened. This is what happened. It was the first time where I literally did what you talk about, where like I pointed the thumb at me. I was like, I should have said something. I could have done a much better job with treatment of my ankle. I could have been responsible and maybe taken better shot selection and played within the offense a little bit rather than allowing my ego to get the best of me, because it worked once doesn't mean it's going to work again. And it was such a learning experience, but all of that kind of coming together, it happened because Pooh Richardson saw something and took a chance, and I got a random phone call in the middle of the night that led to this amazing experience that allowed me to better understand myself and how basketball has transferable skills into what I do now.
Yeah, it's I think lived experience, playing out concepts that we all understand intellectually through lived experience, is such a powerful way to cement them into your behavior. You know, like that, like what I heard stick out to that is like, everybody knows you should take more responsibility, but until you're actually like forced to take more responsibility, it doesn't actually stick. And it's like, you should be humble, like that concept of humility, or you should cherish or be present for what you have. But until you go through losing a father or losing a family member or having basketball taken away from you or whatever, sometimes the emotional scarring isn't strong enough to change your behavior in a way that's lasting. And so like, it's kind of like this concept that I heard the other day where it's like big T trauma or little T trauma. Like, for anybody that's been successful, everybody has trauma, but hopefully it's little T trauma. Like, you were cut from a team when you were in 5th grade and you really wanted to be on, and that sent you on this maniacal journey to be the best basketball player you could be. And that's why you ended up where you are. That's little T trauma. For the moment, it was the most important thing to you. But in the concept of like the type of trauma that you can endure, it's pretty small, right? But it still matters. And big T trauma on the flip side of that can be kind of derailing for your progress as well, whether that would be like whatever, being molested or losing a father or parents super, super young, or being an orphan or whatever. That's not what I'm talking about. But I think that little T trauma stuff is important to cherish almost, and to kind of like wear as a a badge that changed who you are and the lessons that you learn. I look at everything that way and I'm super thankful for it. If I wouldn't have gone through those injuries, my perspective on life would be completely different. Would it be better or worse? I don't know, but I'm thankful for the perspective that I have, and I wouldn't have had it without those. And so to try to rewrite things without those being a part of the story, I think would do where I am now a disservice. So, I completely relate to your story. Completely.
I love the way you categorize it as big T trauma and little T trauma. I've never heard that before, and I think it's a really good depiction of that. And I think for myself and many others, and you as well, pain and loss have been some of the greatest teachers because it forces you to sink or swim. And
of course,
the thing that's really cool is you alluded to it a little bit earlier. People will forget what you did, right? You said you're dust in the wind now at BU basketball. They'll forget all the things that you said, right? It's easy to say things and be cliche on a podcast, but people never forget the way you made them feel. And that's dancing in the locker room. That's helping a buddy out when he's going through an injury. That's being an awesome teammate, which translates to an awesome man, awesome husband, awesome father. When you think about it in that ideology, what does it mean to you to be carrying various forms of trauma from your past, allowing those things to dictate and formulate your habit system and the actionables that you participate in now, knowing that you've got two amazing kids and your wife that are seeing all of that through their own lenses, and they're formulating the same way you were formulating the understanding of patience and delayed gratification by watching your father?
Yeah. Yeah, it's if you think about it too much, it gets pretty heavy. If you think about the way that you're impacting your kids, it's like the concept's it's just pretty heavy.
Yeah.
Because they're so impressionable. And it's a responsibility that I'm happy to wear and that my wife is happy to wear as well. So, but it's a similar concept of being in flow state. If you think about being in flow state, you're not in flow state. If you get into a game and you're getting ready to play and you're thinking about the next move you're going to make, you're not where you need to be from a presence standpoint, right? And parenting is exactly the same way. You're going to make mistakes. Trying to have a mistake-free go at being a parent is just, in concept, is just laughable. In practice, it's just not realistic. So all you can do is try to make yourself better, and just make sure that you're living up to the standards that you hold to yourself, and then they'll fall in line. The values that Bryce Smith holds, if you just act out those values, they're so observant that before you know it, they'll be doing exactly what you're doing. But a lot of times parents think about I need to tell my kids to do this and I need to reprimand them. It's like, no, what you need to do is be more disciplined yourself. What you need to do is not tell them not to be on the iPad. It's just to get off of your phone. They see mom and dad on their phone and they want their iPad. It's like big surprise.
Yeah.
I think about it with myself, dude. When I have the phone in my hands too much, I'm like, that's all. They're just seeing that from an outsider's perspective. I think I'm being present. To them, I'm not. Because all they're observing is me. When I'm in the room, I'm the most important thing to them. Same with my wife. So what we're doing is under a microscope, like it or not. And so the more that I try to get out of thinking about pontificating on how my kids should be, and the more that I get into the things that I need to make sure that I'm following, that I value. I can't just say that I value being off my phone if I'm on my phone all the time. I can't say that I value asking questions and being inquisitive if I don't ask them any questions and I'm not inquisitive. I can't say that I value being conscientious if they don't see me holding the door for people or engaging with people in public in a way that I want them to do it. Or if I'm short, or I'm cussing at people in the car, or, right? So I think what happens there is, yes, you're going to make mistakes by doing and parenting that way that you have no clue you're making, and that will impact your kids long term. But we all had that with our parents. Like, to say that we agreed with everything that our parents did, as great as they were, hypothetically, is just false. So I don't spend any time these days thinking about the ways that I could potentially mess my kids up. That's going to happen on its own. Hopefully it's little t, not big T, right? But what I try to spend more time doing is being self-reflective and saying, are you, in your mind's eye, you have a way you want to act. How close to that are you acting? And if that gap is wide, how do we close that gap? Right? And then everything else will play out over time, I think. And you try to get the big things right. The other thing is too about kids is like, my son has long hair. Most people that I run into think my son's a girl. That's okay. I correct them. But my son doesn't want to cut his hair. So if my son doesn't want to cut his hair, I'm not cutting his hair. That's a small thing. That's not a big thing. And if I were to cut his hair, it'd be more to like alleviate this perception that people think he's a girl in public. It's like, fine, I just correct him. It's no problem. And it'd be more of a reflection on my insecurities about him than it would be on him. Mm-hmm. He doesn't care, right? So the first point that I'll make when I'm making that analogy is like, I limit my insecurities as a dad and how much I'm projecting those onto my kid. How can I limit that is the first thing. 2, by getting the big things right and letting the little things go, I'm allowing them to explore who they are. And I think that's super important because not enough people have a chance when they're young to truly explore the edges of who they are and what they like and what they don't like, and taste test and talk through that with them. I think, and at least in my age, like it was like pretty structured up until a point. Like, this is what we're going to go do, particularly in the Midwest. It's like we play traditional sports. Like, if you want to play sports, like here are your 3 or 4 choices. Mm-hmm. Like, this is how you get better at those. Like, you want to do something on the weekends, like you ride bikes. Like, that is pretty limiting. And for my kids, I want them to have options, and I want them to like truly explore those options to the point where they find their passion, and then they lean in with both shoulders into pushing them into that passion. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing is like getting the big things right. It's like, write down the 3 or 4 or 5 big things that you want them to get right, and leave it at that. It can't be 15 big things. Mm-hmm. It's too many.
Yeah.
It's too many. But what are the true non-negotiables that being a part of the Morris team that there are? And let's stick to those. And let's hammer those home, right? Because those are the values. That's the value system that they're going to end up having. That's what's going to be. And then they're going to paint that value system with their uniqueness mm-hmm. on all the little things, right? Like, and that's what I want.
Goes back to what you said previously,
robots.
Like those 5 pillars kind of give them the structure, and then painting with their uniqueness is right side brain. Kind of that's their creative.
The way that I think about it is frameworks, not rule books. And it's a concept that I implement across my entire life. We all need frameworks, but what you do within that framework is unique to you. But uncontrolled freedom is as bad as complete lockdown.
Yeah.
So having a framework to operate within, and then just saying, you guys, look, the rule is you stay in the basement. I don't care what you guys do in the basement, what toys you play with in the basement. If you ruin the basement, the rule is to stay in the basement, right? And then that allows them to explore that. It's just as like a unique kind of crude metaphor. But the power of having bumper rails on things and to know exactly where the edges are, I think for productivity is like completely underestimated. I think a lot of times when people are unproductive or they're acting out, it's because they just don't know where the edges are. And if you just said, look, dude, look, Bryce, we're giving you 15 shots a game. I don't care how you get those 15, but we're giving you 15 shots a game. What that does for you is to pick your spots accordingly.
Yeah.
Right? It allows you to play with freedom or reservation in some areas. It just gives you something that's kind of like intangible that makes you so much more productive and kind of brings out your best self in a way that like untethered flexibility or complete restriction just doesn't. So huge belief of mine is frameworks, not rule books.
I'm going to dance in the realm for a second of a relatively controversial topic. Is perception reality? Because in some ways you talked about your kids kind of observing, if you're on your phone too much, that's their perception. They may start to integrate those habits. But then in other ways, you talked about society viewing long hair as, you know, your son being a girl instead of a boy. And obviously it's case dependent, but that's a big one, especially in the military world. To you, is perception reality?
I think it depends on the environment.
Yeah. When I talked to Andy Galpin, who we referenced before,
completely case dependent. Yep.
He said the exact same thing in relation to the answer to most questions is it depends. And it really does. It's perfect for this one as well. I would have said the same thing.
Yeah. You know, like I'll give you an example of how I see it. If you have tattoos all over your arms and you're trying to go get a white collar job in New York City, it's going to affect whether they hire you or not. I didn't make the rules. I didn't create the fact that most of the people that work in white collar America maybe lean right and maybe are more conservative. Maybe someday it's not like that. But for now, if that's like your desire to go work on Wall Street and you've got a tattoo on your face, like it's going to impact your ability to get hired. So from without knowing anything about you, and it sucks, but it's the truth. So in that regard, perception is reality. I would say in other areas, other like less stringent, maybe less conservative settings where other men have long hair, the chances that they're calling my son or girl are much less, right? Because of the environment that I'm in and the people that are in that particular environment. So 1,000% depends on where you are and also how willing you are to sacrifice for the setting. If you're in the military and you really want to be in the military, there's certain things that you're going to have to sacrifice in order to be there in the military. And if you're on a basketball team, maybe you and I would have rather been partying and drinking all the time, right? And having ourselves a good old time in college all the time. And maybe that was our most authentic self. But, okay, we knew we had to sacrifice maybe who we were as our most authentic self for what we wanted most. You know, so I really struggle with this whole thing about like, you know, be authentic at all means necessary. And like, maybe if that's what you want, but as a society, if there's other long games that you want to play, you have to realize like getting 3 teardrops tattooed on your face is going to have long-term implications for that. And I think it's okay to recognize that and not get tattoos on your face, even if you really want them, right? Because maybe your most authentic self is someone that achieves all of these great things. And that's just one little piece that you have to miss out on in order to achieve all these other things that you want to do. And if that makes you inauthentic, okay. But I honestly think that like that in those cases, like you do have to pander to the perception a bit in order to get what you want long-term. Yeah. So I think that it's such an interesting question that you ask, and I think about it and reflect on it all the time.
It's kind of the game within the game a little bit.
It is.
And
It
it's not always
absolutely
fair.
is.
It doesn't always feel good, but what do you want? That's over here. And when you work
Yeah.
backwards from that, these decisions that are made in the pursuit of what you want, they should align with what you want. If you want that white collar job and you're
Exactly.
making a decision here that doesn't align with the outcome of what you want, then you got to make a better decision. And you have an amazing
1000%.
post that I've read way too many times about the no bullshit framework for better decisions. It's one of my favorite things that you've put up. I think you've proven to be a master decision maker. And I don't expect you to memorize every single Instagram post that you put up, so I'll kind of prompt you a little bit. But number one is you don't need more time. You simply need to decide. Let's unpack that a little bit.
Well, it comes from a place that I struggle with, which is decision fatigue. Yeah. I mean, it's true. One of the most powerful frameworks that I think anyone has for this is Tim Ferriss's decision-making framework called fear setting. And the general premise of that framework is if the decision is reversible and the cost of a wrong decision is very low, you should make the decision almost immediately.
Yeah.
If the decision is the cost is high, but it's still reversible, then you should take a little bit more time, but still probably make it pretty quick. And if the decision is irreversible, then you need to take time and consider it. But most decisions are low cost and they're completely can be changed if you make the wrong decision and they don't impact you long term. But I've struggled over time with decision fatigue. And the impact of decision fatigue is freaking real, dude. It is real. I mean, the energy that you give to things that should take you 2 seconds to decide, but take you 2 days, the impact that that has is very hard to measure, but it's so high.
You have something here too that also says turning hours into minutes. That's like a very simple one about, I'll just use a podcast for an example, like taking 15 minutes to prep can really get your headspace into the right framework to then go do the thing. You can relate that to a meeting. You can relate that almost to anything.
Yeah. One good example to kind of cement that idea is if you're getting a massage, the guy can spend an hour massaging your calf, or he can take out a Groston tool and Groston the shit out of your calf for 5 minutes, and it's the same outcome. One's a little bit more painful, but it gives you 55 minutes of your life back.
Yeah.
All right. And yeah, so whenever you can find opportunities like that, it's huge.
If the thorn hurts, take it out.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory.
I love that. Going back to the decision fatigue, how do you overcome that? What strategies do you give to people? You know, obviously one of those is what you mentioned earlier, which is hire a coach. That means that your training program is made for you. It's ready to rock. You can save your decisions for the big D decisions rather than the little d decisions.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, that's that huge one. I think positive constraints is a huge one. Again, if you give yourself less choices, it's easier to make a decision.
Which is why Netflix is very difficult. People spend more time scrolling and then pick the thing, and then they're on their phone. They don't even watch the thing. But if it's limited decisions, you actually watch it.
We give it to our kids all the time. You should see the magic of doing this with kids. It's like you have 2 decisions. Kind of popsicle you want. You want blue or red? We're not picking green, purple, orange. Like those are, no, blue or red. What we got? Let's go. 5 seconds. 1, 2, red. Done. Right? If you ask them what color they want, they'd sit there and just alternate between the 5 colors 20 different times because they can't pick. And our brains are no different. I mean, we're just kids' brains in adult bodies pretty much. I mean, we're still dealing with the same things.
Something that I like to say is we never really grow up. We just learn how to act in public sometimes.
Exactly, dude. So, yeah, I would say positive constraints. I would say getting a coach to eliminate that's why group fitness works so well, right? Group fitness works well because it just removes the decision. The only decision you have to make is driving to the gym. Everything else is taken care of, and you drive home. That's why it's so popular, and it'll never go out of fat because people want that. They don't want to have to decide what they do when they show up to the gym, and they're willing to pay whatever 200% of what they pay for a regular gym to go. I think the fear setting one that I mentioned about Tim Ferriss is super powerful. If you just think about your decisions and does this matter? First, let's start with that. Second, can I change it if I make the wrong decision? And what is the cost of me making this decision? And if all those things are pretty much low, then you just pull the trigger and move on. And then the other one that I have to deal with in business is like, should I be making this decision? Is a really powerful question. Or can someone else make this decision? And then if you can, delegate it. Just get it off your plate.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Tell me about your business world. That's something that's not popularized as much, but it's a huge facet of your life. Like, how did you find your way into finance and private equity and alongside all these other great things that you're doing?
I came out of professional basketball with no sense of what I wanted to do as a professional, but I took this personality exam called Strength Fighters 2.0, which is put on by a company called Gallup, and it's like a bunch of these other personality exams. They're pretty accurate, I would say. They're not like defining, but they're directionally accurate. And what it came back with was that I was highly competitive. I was a highly achievement oriented. I was a great communicator. I was restorative in terms of problem solving. And the other one I can't think of off the top of my head, I'll probably remember here in a second. But what it was pointing to was sales and consulting. So I reached out to an old mentor of mine and he said, hey, have you ever heard of buy-side sales for asset management companies? And I was like, no, but I have a degree in finance and I like to talk to people and I think that should work. So he connected me with a lady named Megan Hobbs, who remains one of my biggest mentors and friends to this day. She's amazing. And she got me an interview at Janus Capital. And I remember that interview to be on the inside sales desk. I walked in the interview, I was chewing gum because I was so nervous. I chewed gum the entire interview, which was the most memorable thing about the interview for the people that hired me. And they saw something in me. And I had that job for 9 months and then was promoted to be an outside salesperson for them 9 months into the gig, which just doesn't happen.
Yeah, that's quick.
Yeah, it was quick, and it was a combination of luck and opportunity and timing and what I had shown as far as my ability. And I took that baton and I ran with it and had a very, very successful sales career for Janus before pivoting to real estate and becoming a real estate developer. So I joined a partnership in Indianapolis and became a real estate developer on the commercial side. By the time I left that company and that partnership about a year ago, I was running the entire build-to-suit business for them pretty much. So I was working with Amazon and Domino's and General Electric on their aviation business. And we were developing huge manufacturing and distribution buildings for them across the country.
Wow.
And I was sourcing the capital for those deals. I was helping another partner of mine who was running construction, but kind of rolled up to me and him for the decisions on that side of the business too. So had I would say for only 5 years in the real estate business, very successful tenure there. And then a good friend of mine who works with the company that I'm at now called me and said, hey, we're starting this late stage private investment business and we'd love for you to come join us. So I'm a partner in that business now, and we invest in late stage private companies, Series B and later, and ranging everywhere from, $500 million in revenue, maybe a little bit less, to $30 billion in enterprise value.
Wow.
So there's a wide range in companies that we're investing in. And one of the things that I haven't figured out how to package and market correctly online with what I talk about, but I believe in, I'll go to the mat on this concept, is that most people focus so much on industry specific technical expertise and getting better at a thing, like making a widget, running financial analysis, being an oceanographer, whatever. And all of that's really important if you know for a fact that you want to go and be a CPA in Washington State, right outside of Gonzaga, right? Like if you know with specificity that's what you want to go do, then I think those like very specific trades can be super fruitful, and it could pay off to invest a lot of time to be specific. However, that's not most people, in my opinion. Most people have certain skill sets that could creatively apply to a bunch of different areas based on your interest at that period of time in your life. So with that, what I tell a lot of young people that I'm talking about is that you need to learn evergreen skills. And when I say evergreen skills, what I'm talking about specifically is like the ability to write, the ability to pitch, the ability to sell, the ability to negotiate, the ability to operate, understand like how a business works, the ability to network. And then you can even go even deeper and dive down into like what human qualities make up those abilities. It's like conscientiousness, openness, work ethic, resilience. Like, how are you tapping into the foundational pieces that create who you are as a person? And then as your interests morph over time, or as opportunities come in and out of your life over time, you meet certain people, they see something in you, they're working in an industry you never thought of, but it's really actually pretty cool, and they give you an opportunity. Do you have the skill sets to go be successful in that new opportunity that just came your way? And if the answer to that question is no, then my advice would be to go work on those evergreen skill sets to make yourself more marketable. Mm-hmm. Because what I found in my experience is that even though it's just been basically like public investing, real estate, private investing, there are certain things that are very, very common across all of those. And in each of those, I only spent about 5 years, but I became dangerous enough in the subject matter to go execute, but flexible enough in that in the next opportunity that come my way, I wasn't so specific that I couldn't morph into something else. But the only way to do that is if you continue to develop like an evergreen skill set base that makes you attractive enough, and it lets your personality shine through. And people are like, yeah, I'm gonna take a shot on this kid. Like, he doesn't have any experience as a real estate developer, but let us take a shot. And that was a great decision for them to make me a partner, right? Because we were very successful, made a lot of money. And it's the same way that it goes with the other industries that I've worked in as well. So I'm very, very passionate about that idea. Like I've said, I haven't spent enough time to think about how to market, so it like make it more memeable so it would spread. But I think it's a very powerful concept that there's kind of people on the tangents that are talking about if you were young, where you should go. You should either be an entrepreneur or you should go and like work in the corporate world. And I think there's a go between.
Yeah, I agree.
I think there's a way to be an entrepreneur, but have skill sets that could apply should you find somebody that you want to partner with, mm-hmm. right? Or an opportunity that you want to go work in the corporate world. So anyway, very, very passionate about that. I like
the way you said that also, because one of my favorite questions is, why can't you do both? And what comes to mind is, I think a lot of the world is of the framework have, do, be. I need to have the money mm-hmm. to do the thing, and then I can become the person. And I think I'm in alignment with you, where you should become the person that has the evergreen skills, and then you get reps doing the thing, and then you'll have the success.
For sure.
There's your meme right there.
There it is. Well, it's Hormozy has the same concept, and it's been recycled, so I don't even know who originated it, but he's basically like if you don't have what you want, or you're not where you want to be, it's because you haven't become the person.
I like that a lot.
That's worthy.
I'm a big fan of that guy. He makes things very efficiently articulate.
He does.
It's so digestible.
So communicating.
And the way he says it is seemingly suggestive and nonchalant, where I feel like it really sticks. Versus, I love Jordan Peterson too, and he often articulates things that I'm like thinking or feeling, and I can't really put the right words to it. But it's a little bit tougher to stick because it's a little bit more in the clouds.
For sure. I mean,
both very talented.
Hormozy is a master.
Yeah, they're
Oh,
crushing it.
I like listening to both of them for sure.
As we wrap things up, man, based on kind of giving a peek behind the curtain of your day job and, you know, a big element of your career, you still have a lot of miles to put in. What is it, 4 days now until the Leadville 100? And
4 days.
4 days, let's go. But you're traveling a lot, man, and you still travel 1 to 2 days a week. And you've shared some good behind the scenes of just different travel hacks that you've had within your experiences so far. I'd love to unpack those and share those with people because that's usually where people go off the rails. They're sleep deprived. Everything's inconvenient. They're there for a job. Then inevitably they don't work out. Food, sleep, mindset, everything kind of falls off. And I want to kind of unpack that a little bit so people have a great takeaway when they travel.
Yeah. Yeah, let's think about this because there are a few things that I probably do unconsciously that I could put into words as actionable items. Um, where do you want me to start? Is it related to
I
like
think
wellness
I
or
think for you,
physical or
you've
what?
got this post. I've got it pulled up right here. And
Yeah.
one of my favorite things is just like starting off with movement, going for a run or a jog in a place that, you know, maybe is unfamiliar territory. And you're basically doing it to kind of explore the city, get some blood flow, get some movement in. And rather than having a direct route, like allowing yourself to follow your curiosity and maybe doing a timed run rather than a specific training plan of a duration.
Yep. Yeah, that one's pretty self-explanatory, which is when you're on a plane, you've been sitting for sometimes hours. Just move your body. And there's health benefits to that, but there's just benefits to how sharp your mind can be after you just move your body for a little bit. Um, I think about that a lot if I'm feeling stuck is like, what does my physical space look like? And if by just changing my physical space, does that change my mental space? And that could be like moving your body and like physiological changing the chemistry within your body, or it could just be like getting out of where you're sitting to another place. I think checking the box on movement within a city can do both of those. It could be a walk or it could be a run, but doing that first thing can just like recalibrate you to the area and the space. The other thing that I would say is, particularly if you struggle with diet on the road, there's a couple of things that I do. The first one is I pick a hotel around restaurants that I have scoped and that I think I would want to eat at. And when it comes to restaurants, when I'm on the road for my clients, I pick the restaurants. I do so where it's not like I'm a psychopath and I'm eating at only a vegan place, but I generally pick stuff that I know I'm going to want to eat on that menu in a cool, vibey place that I know my clients will also probably be able to find something that they'd like to eat. And that's where I select. I don't let them control that meal ticket. And I think a lot of people get stuck in that, where they go to the steakhouse that the person always wants to eat at or whatever. That's fine, as long as you scope the menu and you see something that you like. But I take that very seriously because what your diet looks like on the road is going to impact your work on the road, but it's also going to impact you when you get back and trying to get back into routine when you get back home. I mean, the more that you fall off when you're on the road, the harder it's back when it is when you get back.
For sure.
So I pay a lot of attention to that.
When you're indulging
Then
in like business conversations and, you know, trying to build connection and maybe a trust, if you're going to do a partnership with somebody, how much does alcohol play a role in that when you're picking these restaurants and looking to connect with people?
Yeah, look, here's my thing about alcohol is like, I haven't had a drink since I've been in training. Um, and I think everybody has differing opinions on it. Um, if put it this way. So when it comes to clients, some clients will be uncomfortable that you don't drink and others won't really care. Sometimes though, what I've found is it's an awesome opportunity to speak to them as about why alcohol does or doesn't play a role in your life. Um, like everything that you think is that yourself, like most things that you feel self-conscious about that make you unique, usually if you flip them on your head, are really important cornerstones to your story that help you stand out with your clients and create bonds that you don't know existed. So I would say like lean into that.
I like that.
If you're, that being said, if you haven't seen a client in a while, and this is my rule, if I haven't seen a friend in years and they want to have a glass of wine, I'm going to have a glass of wine with them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like, so it's just user subjectivity. I think there's this concept that I've implemented more over the last decade than I did in decades prior. And that's having discipline over your discipline. Sometimes too much discipline puts you at a disadvantage. And if you can't control the areas of your life that you have discipline over, and it's just a blanket rule that's non-negotiable and it'll never change, it's like, what's the use? And are you truly as disciplined as you say you are? Is it an active decision? Or is this more of just like a passive rule that is causing you to miss out on certain richness of life? And so I think about that a lot, is like, yeah, going out with your coworkers on a Thursday that you'll see multiple times over the next couple of months, an opportunity to drink when you're in the middle of training, it's like you could probably pass on that. But if this is the one person that's in town, you haven't seen them in so long, and you're so excited to see them passing through Denver, and this is your one opportunity, and they want to share a glass of wine, get a glass of wine, take a sip, right? Like, it's not going to kill you. Mm-hmm. And I really pay attention to those moments. So I think it's very subjective, but the only thing that I would say is lean into the insecurities you may feel about it, because you don't know what kind of doors and connectivity that can open between you and your clients.
Yeah, no, that's very well said. I love the line, discipline over your discipline. That's a huge takeaway for people. Another one that you note here is taking your vitamins and your supplements with you, trying to be as regular and consistent with those habits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that idea extends past just like vitamins and supplements to like sleep or anything else. It's routine. Mm-hmm. So I even heard Andy Galpin talking about this idea, which I thought was very interesting, which is like, if you sleep with a sound machine at home, bring that same sound machine with you on the road, which we do. We do sleep with a sound machine with 2 kids, but I never thought about that, packing it for myself, right? So I put something on my phone, but it doesn't really work as well on Spotify. So yeah, it ends up being like a half-ass effort to get the sound machine going. But now I'm just going to pack a sound machine. Mm-hmm. And it's like, when you go on these trips, it's not an excuse to deviate. If anything, it's an excuse to just continue what you've been doing at home, which is easier than you think, just with a little bit more forethought. But most people just walk into these trips and they're like, they're just going to roll the dice. Like, I'm going to show up in Atlanta and I'm not going to want to eat the flight food. So I'm going to be starving as soon as I get off the plane, and I'm just going to eat the very first thing that I have, instead of just spending some time before and being like, okay, well, maybe I'll pack something in my bag to eat as soon as I get off the plane, knowing that I'm going to be hungry, so I don't make that bad decision. That gets me to the hotel, to the restaurant that I already scoped out, and then I can have a real meal and just stay on track. Right? It's like, you said this very brilliantly earlier, which is like, the 15 minutes that you spend the night before can save you hours the day after. It's the same thing related to your travel plan and staying on your wellness kick. Just a little bit of prep is all you need.
That's that John Wooden quote, right? Failing to plan is planning to fail. They're in there, man.
I love John Wooden.
They're so cliche, but they just pop up time and time again.
Dude. They're so good.
How do you plan movement into your itinerary? Do you also scope out like the hotel gym?
For sure.
Are you usually looking for, a running route? Like, what does that look like for you?
It just depends on what my training looks like. But yeah, running route, hotel gym. If I'm in a little more lax training block, I'll look for group fitness. So I'll plan, say, okay, where is there a Barry's? I love Barry's for like the time allocation to workout that you get. It's really balanced, but definitely, I mean, the hotel gym is a must. Or if there's not a hotel gym there, a gym very close by, like an Equinox or something that you can get into. But that's how I pick all of my hotels. That's pretty much the only decision that I make related to a hotel is there coffee nearby that's not a Starbucks? And what is the gym situation like? And these are, Bryce, these are so simple, these decisions. People overcomplicate the process of like staying on a health and wellness routine on the road, but the decisions are so simple. It's like, Find a gym, a hotel with a gym. Find a hotel that's walkable to a few restaurants that you feel like you could eat something relatively healthy in. Get some movement as soon as you get off the plane, and try to keep like your routine relative to supplements and sleep as consistent as it is at home.
Mhm.
And if you did those four things, that would take care of 80% at least of what you're going to experience in terms of variance on the road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I totally agree with you. Unfortunately, simple's not easy. And it's very difficult for some people to implement some of those habits that have monumental benefit just because of convenience, like you said. Well, if you plan ahead, now there's convenience. And I really do think that those are great takeaways, not just for travel, but on the day to day, right? Like if you food prep or if you work with a food prep company,
Yeah.
now it eliminates the decision of Uber Eats or having to go to the grocery store. It removes a step. And I think convenience leads to compliance, and then the compliance is the science. The program that you do, the food that you eat, the sleep that you get is the one that actually works to create the life that you want to live. And I think you summarized that beautifully today. I loved all the anecdotes and the analogies and the metaphors. You do a really good job of that. Now I'm seeing how you're able to pull in order to pitch on the big stage, so that way it's relatable, digestible, and taking macro and making it micro where it's bite-sized chunks, which is what you're going to be doing in 4 days, man. You're going to be eating an elephant, this 100-mile race. What's it feeling like in your headspace right now? What are you a little bit intimidated of, and what are you most looking forward to?
Oh man. Yeah. I'm like, I was talking to Mike Idala, our mutual friend, about this yesterday. And I said, I'm mutual parts scared, shitless, and stoked. And he said, yeah, isn't it awesome? It's like, how often in our lives do we get to feel this feeling? And I just said, never. And it's true. There's this video that's been going around. I'm sure you've seen it, of Alex Honnold. And for those people that don't know Alex Honnold, you should just type in free solo into Netflix and then, report back on what you find. But this guy is an amazing climber and does a lot of free solo climbing. And the documentary is based on El Capitan in Yosemite National Park in California. But the video that he's saying is that more people should experience real fear in their lives and real danger and the threat of actually getting hurt by doing something. And the interviewer, who I'm not familiar with, but he asked, why is that important? And he said, because if you don't have real fear, you start creating fear out of nothing. And the and feeling the fear that I feel right now with level 100, and knock on wood, no one gets hurt, and then you come out in one piece, and it's just very painful. But is a good reminder that there's very few things in life to actually be scared about, and that sometimes we create these things in our heads that are just so much bigger than they actually are, because we don't have something adjacent to compare it to provide the perspective that, like, actually this is pretty small, man. Like, worrying about what food's going to be at the airport is like pretty small on a grand scheme of things. Like, that should not be stressing you out. Running 100 miles when you've never run 100 miles before, it's like a little bit higher. And then like free soloing El Capitan's like at the top of the list, right? But the concept is the same, and it's an electric feeling, both from the sense of I'll accomplish something I never accomplished, but I'm also going to learn something about myself that I've never learned. And that's what these experiences are amazing for, because you go into these experiences, and the true crux, I think, of people like you and I that try to push their growth. The reason that we do these physical challenges is because I think deep down, there's areas of our being that we haven't explored and that we know nothing about. And we're going to be introduced to those pieces throughout doing these types of events. Every single ultra that I'll do here forward, I'll learn something new about myself. And come Saturday, there will be something at some moment that hopefully I tap into positively, but maybe not, that teaches me something about myself as an experience that I couldn't have had anywhere else in the world doing anything else. And for me, that is just that's why you do what you do. That's one of the greatest elements of the life that we live, is having new experiences that you can speak about and recall down the line. So I'm so pumped. I mean, I'm pumped to cross the finish line, and I know I will, no matter what. I think I'm going to be pumped with the time that I run. I'm going to be pumped with being in the mountains and feeling more connected to my father. But I also am going to be pumped to walk away and just be completely changed at the core from who I am, going in Saturday morning, which is, like Alex Honnold said, and Mike Idala said, there's not a lot of chances we have in our life to do that. Mm-hmm. And I have one on Saturday, which is fun.
I'll be thinking about you, man. I love the way you've articulated so many things today. And I think you hit the nail on the head there. We think we know ourselves until we position ourselves in an environment or with experience that allow us to navigate the deep, dark corners of ourselves. And somewhere in there, we go through the 5 stages of grief. We explore, we dream, we discover, and we're left with new perspective that changes our story. And going back to the fear that you mentioned, the thing holding most of us back is the story that we tell ourselves. And this allows us to take those barriers that create the framework and extend them just a little bit more to fit a little bit more fruitful experience within this beautiful thing called life.
Yep. It's amazing.
Today was fun, Ty. I appreciate you
this is great.
Letting me poke the bear a little bit.
I love it, dude. No, this was better than anything I could have expected, and I was really looking forward to talking with you. So I really appreciate you giving us a chance to rap.
Totally, man.
Just talk like two boys at a coffee shop. So this is fun.
For sure. If I'm ever traveling through Denver, we're definitely grabbing that glass of wine.
1,000%, dude. Let's do it. Let's grab a couple.
There you go. For those of you listening, if you enjoyed my conversation with Ty Morris today, please rate, review, subscribe, and share with your friends. Keep him in all of our thoughts. Shoot him some DMs as he is attacking the Leadville 100 this Saturday. And as always, guys, stay on the hunt for who you've not yet become. Till next time.